church, all right? And Romans is just, it's full of so much. It's rich in a lot of foundational belief of what it means to be a Christian. It's rich in theology. It's rich in just simple understanding of what Christ did for us, but it also has a lot of hard subjects or hard content that are sometimes difficult to address or difficult to talk about. And so Romans is just overall, it's a great book or letter really, but it's a great book, it's a great letter. And so it's broken down into four main parts, four things that Paul is trying to get across. And so that is what I want us to go over for the next 4 weeks. We're going to kind of break down what he's talking about. And so if you want to turn to Romans 4, it's going to be verse 1. That's where we'll start. Romans 4, verse 1. You can go ahead and turn there. But before we get to the passage, I just kind of want to break down a little bit of the book of Romans for you, or the letter of Romans, and what it is about. Knowing the history, the backstory of why a letter, especially a letter in the New Testament, why is Paul writing to these people? What is his motivation? Why does, parchment, ink, getting someone to write for you, transcribe, was not cheap. So if he felt the need to spend this money to write to them, what is the motivation here? Specifically with the Church of Rome, there's a lot that we can kind of parallel to ourselves, and it's a great example of what's going on in our society now. This is why Paul is writing. Paul is writing because they have conflict at the Church of Rome, okay? So what happened is the Church of Rome pops up. It is full of Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians. They coexist, okay? It's not predominantly, we don't imagine, or it's not inferred that it's predominantly one or the other. It's both. You have Jewish Christians, you have Gentile Christians. The problem arises, though, when Rome gets a new emperor. That emperor expels or deports all the Jewish people. They're asked to leave, okay? And so they're kicked out, basically. And so now you have a church that's just Gentile, because that's all who can stay. 5 years after being deported or expelled, the Jewish people are allowed to come back, okay? So now you have these Jewish people coming back. Well, they come back to their old Roman church, the church they were a part of, only to find, though, that these Gentiles are not following the same traditions and the same way that they used to do church, and they're not adhering to special days that the Jewish people know about, or special holidays, and they're not eating the right foods. And so they have a problem with this. The Jewish people are upset now because if we were going to stick it in our own terms for today, they're not doing church right, okay? You can see the parallels that go on when we talk about maybe an older generation versus newer generation church, contemporary versus traditional, different denominations, right? You're not doing church right. You're not doing the way you're supposed to be doing it. And so we have this conflict, this division in the Roman church of these Jewish Christians who have come back, and they don't agree with the way that the Gentile Christians have been doing church, have been worshiping, and they're trying to fix it and correct it, and you have these two sides that are upset with one another or don't agree, okay? And so Paul is writing this letter so that they can all hear what he has to say as Paul the missionary in the New Testament, as a person who's a Jewish man. Paul's Jewish, but is felt that he is led by God to reach out to give the gospel to the Gentiles. I'm imagining he feels that he has a lot to say on the subject between Jewish Christians, Gentile Christians. He wants them to stop quarreling. He wants them to get along. He wants them to understand what the point of being at church is. And so this is why he's writing to them. And so when we read Romans, at least in my mind, and you can join me, or maybe you have a different way of looking at it, but in my mind, when I read Romans, I think of on the right side of the church, we got the Gentiles sitting in their pews, listening to this letter being read. And then on the left side, we got the Jewish people also listening to the same letter being read to them. We got these two groups of divided people listening to this letter, trying to see what Paul has to say about it, okay? And I think Paul kind of understands this. He's talking to two groups of people here. Two groups of people that he needs to realize should be united in Christ, but not separated, all right? And so The first thing we're going to talk about this week, one of the main points of his letter, is going to be in chapter 4. It is the fact that we are justified, or we are saved, or we are given righteousness through faith, not through works. All right? We have these Jewish people who are so used to this old covenant they've been a part of, where they do all the commands, all the laws, God grants them righteousness or protects them. Paul is trying to get them to understand we're not saved by works, we're saved through faith. So, starting in verse 1, this is what it says. Paul says, "What then shall we say that Abraham, our forefather, according to the flesh, discovered in this matter of faith? If in fact Abraham was justified by works, he had something to boast about, but not before God." So he's basically saying if Abraham was made righteous by works, then he would have something to say, hey, look at what I did. But he doesn't have that to say. He says, what does Scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him. I'm going to struggle with that the whole time. Credited to him as righteousness. All right, so here's what Paul is saying. Paul is saying that if Abraham was justified by works, if he was saved by works, if he was given grace based on his works, then he could boast about what he did. But he has nothing to boast about before God. So we know that's not the case. And then he chooses to quote Genesis 15:6, which we'll get to in a minute. But I want you to see what Paul's doing here. He knows he's talking to Jewish people, and he knows he's talking to Gentiles. And so who is the person he uses as the example? He uses the person who is thought of most highly in Jewish history, in Jewish ancestry. He chooses Father Abraham, the father of the Israelites, of the Jewish people. He chooses him as the example. And the Jewish people would have caught on to this. Oh, he's going to use Abraham as our example. We hold him to the highest of esteems. So Paul is saying, okay, well, let me use Abraham so that you understand what I'm saying here, okay? So he uses Abraham, and he quotes Genesis 15:6. And in Genesis 15:6, what you see is that God tells Abraham that I'm going to make you as numerous as the stars in the sky, if you can count them, as the sands on the beach, right? He tells him, though that is your descendants, I'm going to make them numerous like that, right? And Abraham, it says that Abraham believed what God said, and that because he believed, he was credited righteousness. He was given righteousness not because he did something, but because he had faith in what God told him. Continuing in verse 4, it says, "Now to the one who works, wages are not credited as a gift, but as an obligation. However, to the one who does not work, but trusts God, who justifies the ungodly, their faith is credited as righteousness." David says the same thing. So now you see him bring David in, the most beloved king of Israel. First, he's going to target Abraham, right? The father of the Israelite people. Then he's going to walk on to David, their favorite king. And now he's going to say, well, this is what David has to say about righteousness without works. He says, so David says the same thing when he speaks of the blessedness of the one to whom God credits righteousness apart from works. What does David have to say about righteousness apart from works? He says, blessed are those whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered. I don't know why I say blessed. Is it blessed? Blessed? It depends on how you feel, I guess. Blessed is the one whose sin the Lord will never count against them. Okay? So he's pointing out to them that the one who works, wages are an obligation. If you work for what you get, then the wages are just an obligation. By no means is that a gift, all right? Paul, we receive grace from God. Grace is supposed to be a free gift we don't deserve. It can't be a gift if we've worked for it, if we've done something for it. This is where he's leading to. We as Americans, this is so ingrained in us. This idea of you do this and you earn or you get this as a result. This is what we're taught at. We are taught at a very young age that if we want something, we are going to have to work for it, right? That's like the main complaint of the new generation, is that they never want to work for anything. We are taught the American dream. If you want the American dream, you don't get it for free. You have to work hard and then it will happen, right? We are ingrained in this society that if we work for something, then we will get something as a result. Free does not make sense to us. Free is very difficult for us to hold in our heads. Like, I don't know if you ever heard the saying that free lunches aren't free, right? Because somebody's paying for them, right? Even to that extent, we don't understand free. Like, ask yourself real quick, ask yourself for me, have you ever felt awkward or guilty receiving a gift that you didn't feel that you deserved or you weren't expecting? Have you ever felt awkward or guilty receiving a gift that you weren't expecting or you don't think you deserve? Right? We struggle to even receive that. I have people I know, there's plenty of people I know, who struggle to receive a free meal. They'll immediately start talking about, well, I'll get the next meal, or, well, you don't have to do that. We don't understand free. We don't get it. It doesn't make sense in our heads that we could get something just because. Instead, our innate sense, our innate idea in our heads is that we have to earn it. Paul is saying that if you were earning it, if you were doing work, then the wages are an obligation. Of course I'm going to pay you. That's how this works. But that's not what righteousness is. That's not the righteousness that God is giving us. That is not by obligation. That is by a gift from God. He's talking to Jewish people who are used to this old covenant filled with doing commands, following laws, and he's trying to get them to understand righteousness is not gained by the works that we do, but instead it is by the faith that we have in who God is. That is how it's granted to us. All right, he's trying to get them to understand this. Verse 9, he says, is this blessedness, the blessedness that David just talked about, is this blessedness only for the circumcised or also for the uncircumcised? All right. You can almost change those words to circumcised are Jewish people, right? And uncircumcised are Gentiles. So he's asking, is this blessedness only for Jewish people or is it also for Gentiles? We have been saying that Abraham's faith was credited to him as righteousness. He's asking, under what circumstances was it credited? Was it after he was circumcised or before? It was not after, but before. And he received circumcision as a sign, a seal of the righteousness that he already had by faith while he was still uncircumcised. So then, he is the father of all who believe but have not been circumcised, in order that the righteousness might be credited to them. So he's the father of all who are still uncircumcised, the father of Gentiles, because in order that their righteousness might be credited to them. They have the same faith as Abraham. And he is then also the father of the circumcised, of the Jewish people, who not only are circumcised, but who also follow in the footsteps of the faith that our father Abraham had before he was circumcised. All right, I know that you know how Paul is. He says the same words over and over in like a loop or a circle, and it gets difficult to understand. Here's what he's saying, okay? In Genesis, God makes this covenant with Abraham. Abraham has faith, and he's credited righteousness, right? Later, then God asked Abraham that him and his entire family need to be circumcised, and they need to be circumcised as a show of faith or as a sign or a seal that they belong to God, that they're set apart, and that this covenant is in place, okay? And so Paul is suggesting to these Jewish people, using their own scripture, right? Using their own scripture that they would know well, he's asking them, when did Abraham get his righteousness? Did he get it before he got circumcised, before he followed God's command, or did he get it after he followed God's command? And he's pointing out that Abraham received righteousness before he followed God's command, before he completed the box or checked off the box, the checklist, before he worried about the law. He had already received righteousness. So what's the point in pointing this out? Nobody likes to talk about circumcision. So why is he talking about it with them? He's pointing it out because he's saying Abraham received righteousness from God before he did any works. He didn't get circumcised first and then receive his faith or receive his righteousness. No, he received righteousness before he did any works because of his faith. All right, he's pointing out to them that this faith is what allows us to receive the righteousness of God, not his works, not his actions, not the laws that he's following. This is what he's trying to get them to see still. Even Abraham received righteousness before he followed commands. This righteousness is a gift from God granted by faith, not by works. And then, again, you got to remember, these Jewish people, they would have seen Abraham in the highest esteem. They're proud to be a son of Abraham. And notice what he does next, which as a person who loves to debate, it's genius, okay? So I don't want you to miss it. Notice what he does next. He then says, so if he received righteousness by faith before he was circumcised, before he followed commands, then he's also the father of the uncircumcised in order that righteousness might be credited to them. So he's basically saying he's not only the father of Jewish people, he's also the father of Gentiles. Imagine with me for a second that you're a proud Jewish man who'd been following the laws and the commands for your entire life, and you're proud of Abraham, your ancestor, only for Paul to tell you that, well, but you're not the only son of Abraham. That Gentile over there who didn't even know about God until a year ago, he's also a son of Abraham. The one sitting across the pews on the other side of the church, the one you don't agree with, he's a son of Abraham too. Why? Because he has the same faith that Abraham had, and so he's been credited righteousness. He's not going to leave him out. He points out, and then he is also the father of the circumcised, of the Jewish people, who are not only circumcised, but he reminds them it's not because you're circumcised that you are a son of Abraham, that you have faith, but also who follow in the footsteps of the faith of our father Abraham. So we are united in what? Faith, not in our works. It's not by what we do that we have received this righteousness, but instead we are united through the faith that we have in God and in Jesus Christ. That's what allows us to be covered in righteousness. So he's taking these two groups and trying to bring them together here. And he ends it like this. He says, it was not through the law that Abraham and his offspring received the promise that he would be heir of the world, but through the righteousness that comes by faith. For if those who depend on the law are heirs, faith means nothing and the promise is worthless. Why? Because the law brings wrath. And where there is no law, there is no transgression. Therefore, the promise that God gives us, the promise comes by faith, so that it may be by grace and may be guaranteed to all Abraham's offspring, not only to those who are of the law, but also to those who have the faith of Abraham. He is the father of us all. All right. So he's driving the stake through. He's driving his point home here, saying it was not through the law, those commands, those laws that you used to follow as a Jewish person, the things that even we in now the 21st century, the extra rules that we put on church, or the extra things that we say have to be done, the traditions that we follow. He's saying it's not by the law, it's not by the works that Abraham and his offspring received the promise, but by faith that they gained righteousness. And then notice what he drives home. For if those who depend on the law, for if it's the people who only worry about following the law and following the works and doing things, if they're the ones that are the heirs, if they're the ones who are going to receive the inheritance of righteousness, if it's by works that we get that stuff, then faith means nothing and God's promise is worthless. What is the point of faith? Why do we need to believe? Why do we need God's promise of grace if we can just earn it for ourselves through works? So if only the people following the commands and laws are going to get into heaven, then why do we need faith and why do we need God's promise? Just follow the rules and you'll be fine. But we know we can't do that. And Paul is pointing out that it's not by the works. Those aren't going to get you anywhere. But instead it is by faith that we receive this righteousness, because the law brings wrath. The law shows us what our sin is. That sin produces death. Meanwhile, our faith in Jesus Christ shows us his glory and righteousness, and that produces righteousness in us. These are the two things he's trying to get them to understand. It's a difference here. Faith is what gains us righteousness, faith in Jesus Christ and in God. And we are granted, he says, so that it may be by grace and may be guaranteed. So it's something that we've been credited. It's something that we've been given. It's a free gift that we get. It is not something we earn or gain by doing works. And if we all have the same faith, and that faith has created or been credited to us as righteousness in all of us, then we are all sons of Abraham. You notice the uniting message he's trying to get here is stop quarreling about what's going on in the church. Stop bickering about the traditions that aren't being followed, or the days that aren't holidays, and the food that we should be eating, and what songs we're singing, and what we should wear to church, and how we should act, and the words that we should use while praying. Stop bickering about that stuff. Stop finding reasons to divide yourselves, and realize that we all have the same righteousness because we all have the same faith that Abraham had, and that faith, by the grace of God, is credited to us as righteousness. And we should be united in that fact, not divided in it. In Romans, Paul is talking to a very divided church. It's a very divided church. They have two separate views on how church should be done. They have been raised in two separate cultures. They have two separate ways that they have come to know the gospel, to know Jesus Christ. They are different in a lot of ways. And he's trying to get them to come back together and stop this division. If you've never read the book of Romans, I would encourage you, at the very least, read the first 12 chapters, okay? In the first 12 chapters, he really lays out the good news of the gospel, starting at the foundation of this is what we need to understand so that we can come together on that foundation, right? If you've ever heard of the Roman road, it's a type of teaching where you only use the book of Romans to walk somebody through the gospel and how to get saved. This is wise because Paul does such a great job of spelling out the foundation of the gospel within these first chapters of Romans. And so I would encourage you, if you've never read Romans, remember it's a letter. I would encourage you to read it all the way through in one sitting, because that's how you would read a letter. If Paul had written to you at the church, someone would have gotten up on stage and would have read the entire letter at one time, so you could hear everything Paul was addressing. So I would encourage you, sit down, read the book of Romans. It'll take about 45 minutes. The chapters are not exceedingly long or anything. But read what he has to say, and you'll see an overarching theme throughout his letter, which is we need to be united in the faith that we both share in Jesus Christ and in the righteousness that we both receive. Our society, and this is why Romans relates to us so well right now, our society, we are so tricked or trained to follow this kind of rat race that we're in, right? We have to be enough. We have to be capable of everything. If we're going to get what we want, we have to work for it. We can't slow down. This is why we run at a relentless pace, right? Because if we slow down, we'll fall behind. And, if there's things I'm unhappy about in my life, it's because I'm not working hard enough for them. And so everything is a secondary priority. Our first priority is we need to work, we need to gain wealth, we need to get money. And the only way we're going to get all those things is by sacrificing time. And the only way we're going to get those things is by putting in consistent effort and continue working and working and working. And we put all of that pressure, whether we're capable, whether we have the ability, it's our responsibility. We put all of that on our shoulders and we drag it forward, trying to get what we think will make us content. That is what we do. And as a person with an anxiety disorder, my anxiety is so good, at grabbing onto that and being like, well, Nathan, this isn't working out. These things aren't going correctly in your life. These things are what you're missing because you aren't doing enough. You need to go forward faster, right? And so it's no coincidence that when I was about to trip. When I talk to God, when I go to him, when I kind of just sit in his presence in prayer and I relax myself and I slow my mind down, it's no coincidence that what I receive from him is comfort and peace and rest, and my shoulders get lighter because I'm reminded that it's not about me. It's not about how much I can do. I'm not the one that has to be enough. I don't have to succeed at these things so that I can somehow succeed in everything else. No. It's not righteousness that I earn. It's not my salvation that I earn. I'm not justified by the works that I do, but it's by faith alone. I don't need to overcome the world because Jesus has already overcome it for me. I don't need to earn my righteousness or prove that somehow I deserve to be in heaven, because the reality is I don't deserve to be there, but it's by a free gift that I get to. And so you may be doing the same thing where you hold on to all this pressure, hold on to these societal rules. You got to keep up with the Joneses. I have to do all of this if I'm going to get what I want, get what I desire, right? Again, that's the American dream. You got to work for it. If you're going to get it, you can't just sit at home and wait for it. You got to go after it. You got to run towards it. But the reality is that you don't have to be in that rat race if you don't want to. You don't have to be a part of that results-based ideology if you don't want to. You don't have to shoulder everything on your own. You don't have to put everything on you. You don't have to be the only one who is capable. It's not all about whether or not you can make it on your own. The gospel changes that. If we have faith in Jesus Christ, he takes that burden for us. And we're not made righteous because of our works. We're not justified because of our reputation. Instead, we're made righteous because God loves us, and we're justified because he died for us. End of story. And the rest of it, he takes care of it because we're no longer enemies of God. We're not separated from him, but we are a friend of his, and we are children of God, and he takes care of his children. He makes them righteous, and he gives them what they need based on his love for them, not based on how good they are or how capable they are or what their abilities are and how much they can earn on their own. And so whether you're a Christian or whether you don't have a relationship with God, sometimes Christians need to be reminded of this stuff. So whether you're Christian or you don't believe in God, I would encourage you to pray with me if you're struggling with these things. If you got weight on your shoulders and you feel like you're the one dragging the weight around, you don't have to continue. You don't have to go through life in that fashion. All it requires is faith, is belief in who Jesus Christ is. Allow him to carry those burdens. And before you know it, you're much lighter. Jesus says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. It's because he takes it on for you. You don't have to be carrying that weight on you. Instead, you can experience comfort, rest, peace, contentedness at where you are because you're made righteous not by what we do, by instead who we believe in. And so as I pray, I would encourage you to just pray the prayer with me. Even as a Christian, if you need your burden lightened, this is a reminder that can happen by just handing it over. But if you're not a Christian, if you don't believe, you have an opportunity to start that relationship today. So Kyler, if y'all want to head back up here, they're going to start some music. I'm going to pray. And if you'd like to join in that prayer, you're more than welcome to.